Apples are a great food to start with if you're new to canning or new to preserving food because they're acidic enough that it only requires a water bath canner. You don't have to have a pressure canner like one of these. You can just use a regular big pot. And because they're acidic enough for a water bath canner, you also don't have to preserve them in something like a brine or a syrup unless you want to for flavor purposes. Today I'm going to be canning them in a very, very light syrup with just a little bit of honey in it to give it a little extra flavor. Although if you wanted to can them just in water, that would be perfectly fine. Canned apples can be used in cobblers or pies or kind of the base for any fruit dessert. And so canning apples is a really versatile ingredient to be able to have on hand in your pantry. So I have my apples here. I'm going to go ahead and sort through them first and foremost. I can already see on the top here, I have one that I need to discard. This has a big crack in the middle and there's some mold on the bottom. And so this one I will set aside, I won't can it. If there's bruising or blemishes on your fruit, you can just cut those out and slice the fruit up normally and can them. But because this one has mold on it, I'm going to cut out the mold, cut out the crack, and then we'll eat this fresh. I won't can it. And I've already sorted through the rest of my fruit, so these should be all ready to go. To prepare your supplies and get your water bath canner ready to go, these are new jars with clean lids on them. If you're using old jars, that's not a problem. If you're using old rings, that's not a problem, but the lids have to be brand new. You can reuse these, you cannot reuse these. This needs to be new every single time because you need a good seal on that rubber part. Even though these are brand new jars and brand new lids, I'm going to go ahead and wash all of them in soapy water. Okay, I have my clean jars in my water bath canner filled with hot water to about here. I'm using pint jars, and so I'm not going to fill it all the way up to the top, probably just halfway. These I'm going to bring to a boil and let boil for probably about 10 minutes and then turn it all the way down to low so that they stay hot. My canner is heating up, and so I'm just peeling and slicing my apples. Normally, if I had a really big batch, I would use my hand crank apple peeler and slicer, but it makes a huge mess. And since I'm only doing about 5 pounds of apples today, I'm just going to peel them by hand and not even worry about pulling out my peel. Depending on what you plan on using your canned apples for, there are different shapes that you can cut your apples into. I like to cut them into quarters because it's easiest, and I like to leave my fruit as big as I can when I can them because your fruit does cook and it does get a little soft. And so if you're cutting up your fruit into small little chunks, it's going to get softer, it's going to have more of a chance of kind of falling apart in your jars. But if you keep it bigger in either halves or quarters, it probably will keep its texture a lot better. After you've peeled and chunked a good amount of your apples, you'll notice that they might start to turn brown. This happens after they start peeling and are left out to get the oxygen to them. They start to turn brown and discolor. It doesn't really do anything to the flavor, but it does make them a little bit uglier. So I'm going to squeeze some fresh lemon juice over the apples and just keep them tossed in fresh lemon juice while I'm peeling them and prepare them. The lemon juice will also add a really nice bright flavor to your final product. My canner just finished sterilizing the jars. This usually always happens to me. My canner and my jars are ready before my fruit is ready. So I'm just going to turn my stove down all the way to the lowest setting so that it keeps the jars hot. You want your jars to be hot. and this will just hang out and set while I'm finishing up preparing my. Now's the exciting part. We get to make our syrup. This can be as sweet as you like or as plain as you like. If you want to use plain water, that's perfectly fine. Your apples will probably just turn out a little less bright, a little less flavorful. If you want to use a light syrup with sugar, you can. I am using a light syrup with honey. I'm going to use 5 cups of water and probably a 1/3 cup honey, just to give it a tiny little touch of sweetness. You can also use just plain apple juice if you want as well. So we'll put our apples in the pot. Probably have to use 2 quarts of water. 2 quarts of water. So they're not quite covered, but I think it'll work. And I will light this, start to get it hot, and since there's 8 cups of water in there, I'm not going to do the math, and I'm probably just going to use a 1/2 cup of honey instead. I just poured my honey in. I'm going to stir this around, make sure it's dissolved really well, and then I'll put it on high heat, cover, and let it come to a boil. It just finished boiling. I let it go for just a couple minutes. You want your fruit hot but not cooked. We want hot fruit in our hot jars. It's called the hot pack method, and this will leave you with a better end product. So I'm going to take this off the heat, get my jars out, and ladle my fruit into my jars, top with the syrup. I'm using these tea towels that my great grandma hand embroidered, I don't know how many decades ago. This one's Monday. I have a whole set for every day of the week. My grandma gave these to me at my wedding. This was my wedding gift for my grandma. They were in pristine condition and I used them. This one's stained and everything. I kept Sunday nice as a family heirloom, but all the rest of them I use. They're great. They're the best little tea towels. And I grab my hot jars out with my little tongue gripper tool. I've noticed that some people accidentally use these backwards. This black part is the handle. This is the part that you grab the jar with, and the part that you grab the jar with has this round mouth. Some people use it like this. Use it this way. And that should stay hot just while I'm jarring my fruit. Use your funnel, just put it in your jar. Using a slotted spoon, put the fruit into your jar. You want to pack it pretty tightly. Before you put the lids on, you'll want to go ahead and check and make sure there aren't any air bubbles trapped. So if you can see, there's an air bubble here that I need to get out. If I just go in there with a spatula, move the fruit around, those air bubbles come out, and then you can readjust the amount of syrup that you put in there to make sure you get that 1/2 inch headspace. After your apples are packed into the hot jars, go ahead and take a wetted down paper towel and make sure that there's not any juice or debris or apple parts along the rims of your apples, of the jars. If there's anything between that and the seal on the lid, it won't give you a good seal. Okay, these are my clean lids and my clean rings. So I just put those on, screw it fingertip tight. I'm gonna do that for all of these, and then they'll be ready for the canner. So I'm going to take the lid off and drop them in. It's really important to get all of the bubbles out of your fruit in the jar before you put them in the canner and put the lids on them, because if you have bubbles in there, there's an increased chance of siphoning, which means that the syrup and the fruit leak out of the jar while it's in the canner. So to avoid that, it's best to make sure that all of your bubbles are out and make sure that you have the correct amount of headspace. If you do those things right, then you shouldn't get any siphoning. All of my jars are in here. I fortunately had enough water to cover all of them completely. If all of your jars are in your canner and they're not completely covered in water, you will need to top off the water bath canner with more hot water until it goes above all of the jars. My water's all above there, so I'm going to put my jar on, my lid on, turn it up to high. Once it starts boiling, I can turn it back down, just to keep it at a simmer. Basically, you want it definitely boiling though. But once it starts boiling, I'll set my timer for 20 minutes and then they'll pretty much be done. So now I have this bowl of apple scraps. You can do so many things with the scraps of fruit that come off of your apples or pears or whatever you're using. I could boil these down and make it into apple jelly. I could turn it into apple cider vinegar. I could compost them if I just wanted to toss them out, or any kind of livestock or animals. If you have horses or cattle or hogs, chickens, rabbits, they will eat these also. I think I'm going to go ahead and just give these to my chickens because it's in the middle of the winter and so their foraging is kind of limited right now. This will be a real treat for them. They love them.
Yep.
My timer went off, so I turned off the heat. I'm going to just open the lid and let it sit in there with just the lid off for about 5 minutes. This helps bring them back to room temperature not as quickly. You don't want extreme temperature shifts, getting too hot too fast or cooling down too fast, because that'll make your jars more easily break. After your canner has sat with the lid off for 5 minutes, you can take out your jars. Be careful because they'll be really hot. Put them on a towel to completely cool. I usually put mine on a towel and leave them right there overnight so that I know for sure they're cool. If your lids aren't popped down, meaning that they're sealed straight out of the canner, don't worry, that's totally normal. It happens to everyone. They usually won't suck and seal that little tab on the lid down until after they've cooled down. So you'll notice that after they've been out on the counter for about an hour or so, you'll be able to hear the lids start popping. They'll pop down. In 12 hours, all of the lids should be popped down. If the tab is not popped down after 12 hours, then it probably didn't get sealed. You're going to either want to recan it or reprocess it in the canner, or put it in your fridge to use strictly. My helpers with me. My jars are completely cooled off. All of my tabs have popped down, so they should be sealed, but you'll want to take your rings off of your jars and pick them up by the lid. If they stay, then you've got a pretty good seal on there, and again, you want to make sure all your tabs are pushed down. So like I said yesterday, sometimes you'll get siphoning, which is when your juices kind of leak out the lids while they're cooking. It's a little bit of siphoning is normal, but that's why we take the rings off, and you can get a wet rag and wipe off the sticky that's left on it. After you wipe them off and you take your rings off and everything, you can store them at room temperature. They're shelf stable. If you want to store them in a dark pantry or a basement or somewhere, that's kind of ideal, a little bit cooler and out of direct sunlight. That'll make your product last even longer. Ideally, use them in about a year, but if it's more than a year, 2 years, sometimes people even eat them after 5 years. If you have a good seal on it, you'd be surprised how long they last. So, canned apples. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it helped you feel more confident getting into canning and doing everything. Lola and Hazel and I are going to enjoy the rest of our day. Thank you again for watching. If you would like to support us and stay up to date on our videos, go ahead and click the subscribe button and the notification bell. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Happy canning!
This thing on.